As many of you that follow my channel know that recently I acquired a Neural DSP Quad Cortex modeler, and I'm really excited to dive into it. I did one video just a few days ago to sort of introduce everybody to the fact that I actually have one of these now, and I ended up getting a load of requests for content for videos to show how I would do certain things on it. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to take a look at creating a great tone for your Quad Cortex, and I'm going to take you through my approach. Now, I just want to put a disclaimer here. These videos always seem to set a lot of people off to tell me why they wouldn't do it this way or why they wouldn't do it that way, and that's fine. Nobody has to follow anything I'm saying or anything that anybody is saying. There's a lot of different ways to work with all of these modelers, and there's a lot of very successful ways to work. But since I do have a following of folks who do ask me how I do things, I like to put these videos out showing my approach. I am not in any way saying it's the only way to do things, but it is an approach that I've had great success with, and that I've had many people tell me that worked really well for them too. So I'm going to share some of my ideas, but again, if there's anything in here that you find doesn't work for you, you simply don't have to use it. It's no problem, no hard feelings, and we can still be friends. So I'm going to take you through step by step my approach to creating kind of a little template that I use as the backbone, or at least a starting point for every preset that I make, whether I'm using built-in models that are already in the Quad Cortex, and I would even use this method with neural captures to maximize my ability to get the exact results I want for each particular situation. You can also go follow me on Cortex Cloud at Sadites. I'll have that up on the screen and below in the description. Give me a follow there. I'm going to have some free presets up there. I'm going to also have my neural captures and ultimate presets available at my website. If you want to check that, I'll have the link below to that. And if you want to grab one of those, go check them out on my website. So without further ado, let's dive right over to Cortex Control and take a look to see how I would set my Quad Cortex template up to get some great tones. All right, so here we are over in Cortex Control. Today I'm going to be playing my absolutely beautiful Gibson Les Paul Standard 60s. Really love this guitar, really inspiring instrument to play. And here is my little template that I utilize on my Quad Cortex. It's going to look quite similar to templates I have for other modelers, and something that I've had, as I mentioned, a lot of success with. Again, this is just a starting point. The template is not going to contain an amp or a cab block. That's going to be for you to decide what you want to put in there. But regardless of the amp and cab that you're going to utilize, all of this part of the chain down here is still going to be quite applicable and hopefully quite useful for you. And we'll take you through this step by step. You'll notice that I've set this up over 2 rows here. I could have jammed everything into 1 row, and you could simply drag those up if it works better for you as well. But I was trying to leave some space for anybody who wanted to add some of their own effects before and after the amp and cab. But obviously you can customize this, just designed to get you started. So starting at the end of the chain, we're going to talk about what I like to do, something that actually a lot of people will give me a lot of heat about, but a lot of those people probably just aren't really listening to what I'm saying concerning this block and its positioning, and are probably not utilizing it correctly. I like to put a compressor at the end of the chain. I've done this on my analog pedal boards for years. I just like what it does, the polish it gives to the sound when set correctly. Now, obviously, if we set it incorrectly, this can do a lot of damage. So I've opted for this opto compressor at the end. Now, the threshold is going to be extremely important setting, and it's really going to be dependent on what you do before the compressor. The more level that you have coming in, so if I go over to my amp block here and crank the output level, then that's going to send more level into the compressor, which is going to have it have more gain reduction. So we would have to adjust the threshold accordingly. So you are not going to be able to just leave the threshold alone at where I have it set. You're going to have to tweak that. What I am going for is only about a dB or a dB and a half of gain reduction. You'll notice when I play, it's barely working, and I really almost want this to be a little bit transparent, just to add a very subtle amount of compression here. And that's why the folks who tell me you should never put this after your reverb and your delay and all of these criticisms, I tell them that if you're using this properly, it's really not going to make a big difference. It's just going to help to just kind of glue everything together and smooth things out a little bit and just give it that polished, finished feel and sound to it. So I've chosen to go with the Opto Comp with a ratio of 2, attack of 5 milliseconds, release of somewhere between 50 and 100 milliseconds. I just decided on 100 here. I just add a dab of makeup gain so that even if I turn this off, You know, we're not going to have this huge jump in volume or drop in volume, but you will get a very subtle feel difference there. So that's one of the always on blocks I have. I just leave that alone with those settings. If you find it's a little much, another thing you can do is blend that in with just the unaffected dry signal using the mix control. Moving on from that, I put a low and high cut block right before that. Now, a lot of folks might say, well, why don't you just go over to the cab block and do it there? Well, the one advantage to doing it here with the dedicated block is that I can control the slope of how dramatic that high and low pass filter are going to be. I usually have as a starting point 18 dB per octave slope on those, both the high and low pass filter, 100 hertz on the low cut and 10 kilohertz on the high cut. Good starting point. I mean, you can mess around with that. You can also just turn that off if it's something you don't feel you need, but this helps to kind of clean up some of those frequencies outside of the range of what we might need in a mix, you know, clearing up some of the lows for the bass guitar and the kick drum to sit better, getting rid of some of those high frequencies, information that's not really oftentimes super important to our tone, can open up some sonic space in a mix for cymbals and whatnot. So those are my starting points there. Now, I always like with modelers to have some sort of reverb. Now, obviously, there's going to be times where we want a big overt reverb for an effect, but that's not what we're talking about here. I find if we don't have any reverb, that what happens is things have a very direct, abrasive, sometimes harsh sound. Even adding in a subtle room reverb, mix of 35%, 1 second decay, pre-delay at 10 milliseconds, high and low pass you can mess around with. I leave my trails on. You know, you could even bring that low pass down into the 5,000 hertz range. I just find what that does is it just gives it a little more natural sound, like we are actually playing in an actual room. Now, anybody who follows my channel on other modelers will know I'm a real sucker for a tape delay. I've put this in here. Obviously, you're not going to have it on all the time simply because we may not want delay on all the time. But I use it in a very subtle manner. I have my mix in and around 25 to 30%. Feedback usually in and around 20 to 25%. Again, the high and low pass filter is going to be to taste, depending on how dark you want those delayed repeats. You know, we can take that low pass way down, get really kind of muddy, dark repeats, which kind of is nice in some cases, but we can bring that up to wherever we feel works. My drive control setting I have in and around 10%. Now, one of the most important things that I like to have when I'm using any delay is have it synced to the music. So oftentimes I'll start off with a quarter note so that, you know, we look at our tempo down here, and if I come down here and set that to 120, I'm going to have repeats every quarter note at 120 beats per minute. I always like that delay to be timed with the music, and that allows it to kind of maybe not be quite as noticeable, but it does help it to just sit in the mix a little bit nicer. I also like my delay to be not too overt just for my general working delay. There's obviously, again, going to be situations where I want something more specific and overt because it's creating a musical idea, let's say, right? So, but here, if I'm playing... it's not really engulfing the whole tone, and it's not taking away from my direct unaffected guitar tone. Now, one of the most important blocks and one of my favorite blocks to have in any template is a low and high shelf EQ, and that's going to be worked into our parametric 3 block here. Now, one of my favorite things to do, you'll notice I've just disengaged the peak filter here, but I do have the low and the high shelf set here. Now, I love setting both the low and the high shelf, in this case, kind of on top of one another, both at 650 hertz. Now, this has a Q as well, which is going to basically control the slope. So if you look here, I have it set at 0.71, but as I raise this, you'll notice it just becomes kind of a controlling that crossover point because I have those both set at the same area. So it's going to be a more dramatic slope, basically. So I kind of found this works really nice down here around 0.7 and just does what I want it to do. Now, the reason I like to have both of these set with their frequencies at 650 hertz is for the simple reason that, and this one here I set at 0.85, but I can bring that back down. That's going to be very subtle. The reason is it allows me to use the high shelf to kind of just control any harshness in a preset or a tone. If there's some harshness to it, I can simply roll all the frequencies above 650 back and it tames some of that. If there's some mud or low end that I don't really like in there, I can go to those low frequencies below 650 and take care of that with very subtle moves. And this is very powerful. Moves even as small as, like I have here, 1 dB, 1.5 dB can really shape our tone. So if I turn this off, you can hear what this sounds like. Now, if I wanted to brighten that up, see how powerful this is. Now, I'm not saying it should be there by any means. I'm just giving you an example of how powerful a tool this can be. And if we go down to our low shelf, same thing. I just find it gives a nice, subtle, but really sweet polish to any sound. Now, if we don't need it, we don't need it. We can turn it off, but I still keep that block there because I never know. Maybe I'm going to get live into a room that makes things sound a little bright. That gives me a very quick, intuitive way without having to go play around with the microphone position, which can start getting into all sorts of trouble real quick. If you just need a quick adjustment, I can come in here and know that things are bright. I'm going to go to my high shelf and I'm going to maybe just peel that back a bit. Or things are too dark, I can boost that up. Things are sounding muddy, I can go to my lows and pull that back. So I find that that is a must-have block for me and my workflow and something that allows me to dial things in very effortlessly. Now, what have you been hearing here is the Brit Plexi 100 Normal with the settings from one of the presets that I have up on Cortex Cloud. Give me a follow at Sadites. It's a single scene preset I have up there. You can grab that for free. I also have a full featured multi-scene preset based around this, available at my website, called the Brit Plex Ultimate Preset, full array of effects, multi-scenes, going from cleaner all the way up to overdriven and lead, and it sounds really nice. I have a demo that I'll play for you later in this video so you can hear what the sound of all of those scenes utilized together in a mix sound like. So that's what I have here, but obviously one of the most important elements is going to be picking the appropriate amp and obviously the appropriate cab and positioning the mic properly. I'm a huge fan of ribbon mics. I really love the fact we have the Ribbon 160 and the Ribbon 10. I'm guessing the Ribbon 10 is based after the Royer R10, a microphone I have in my studio and what I utilize with my neural captures quite often. It's a real beautiful mic. You'll notice I positioned it here, right around here. Basically, position is 2.6, distance is 4.4. Pan to the center. I'm only utilizing the one mic. Oftentimes I do. I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with utilizing two mics and blending them. I do that sometimes as well. But for the most part, I try to keep things simple and get what I can out of the mics. And I find the ribbon mic position properly, first of all, then we can tweak things very subtly with the shelf EQ, add that bit of compression at the end, and usually I can have a really great tone dialed in very quickly. But obviously, the choice of the appropriate cab, or a cab that is going to give us generally the idea of what we want with the proper mic position in the proper place, is going to be a huge part of our tone, and obviously then coming in and dialing in the tone stack in an appropriate manner. And so what I've done here is I've set up two scenes. Scene A is going to have our compressor, our high and low cuts, our reverb, and our high and low shelf, and scene B is just going to be the amp and the cab. So you can hear the difference between these two. So here is just the amp and the cab without any of these little sweeteners I've put in. It's a nice starting point. Add the sweeteners in. Again, without. And with. And I think that that all adds up to a really beautiful tone that's going to work with a lot of different amps and cabs. Now, some folks might ask, would I do a similar thing with neural captures? And I absolutely would. And I have some of my captures here. Let's take something like my Buddha DC-OD1. Now, this is an amp and a cab capture. You'll notice it's all flat here. So basically, I'm just going to go over here where I have all of these blocks turned off. That's a capture of my very rare, hard to find Buddha SuperDrive 30 Series 1 hand-wired amp from a number of years ago. I was able to source one of those out again. It's an amp I've always loved, one of my favorites. So some great captures there. Now, you might say that sounds fine, but, you know, I'm going to add in all these little sweeteners again. Back without the sweeteners. You'll notice that it just makes things a little more mix ready, polishes everything up a little bit, and gives us a very quick, intuitive way of being able to tweak our tone on the fly in a manner that can be extremely useful. All right, what did you guys think? I hope you enjoyed that look at how I approach making tones. Again, if there's something in there that doesn't work for you, that's fine. Just don't utilize it. But that whole system that I put together, utilizing the compressor and the shelf EQ especially, a little bit of reverb, I find gives a really great starting point. Regardless of what I'm trying to accomplish, it also gives me maximum ability to make really quick, on-the-fly, subtle but meaningful tweaks, depending on the situation I'm in, whether in the studio or live. And I hope that you find it works for you as well. So you can head on over, follow me at Cortex Cloud at Sadites, grab that template, and I hope it helps you to be able to dial in your presets and tones in a more efficient manner. Also, go check out my website, the link below, where I have all my neural captures and my ultimate quad Cortex presets available. And if you'd like to support my channel, you can grab some of those. I really do appreciate that. Thank you guys again so much for tuning in. Please like the video, share it with anybody you think would get some use or enjoyment out of watching it. Also, please subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. Thanks again so much for tuning in. I'm going to leave you with a demo video of one of my quad Cortex presets on the way out. I hope you enjoy the music. Thanks again so much for sharing your time with me. Ciao for now.